It was a really bad performance. It was kind of I felt a lot of pressure from the jiu-jitsu community and from a lot of people in my family and everybody kind of saying you should just use jiu-jitsu and I don't need to box and I don't need to strike. And it was the first time in my life where I kind of listened to people and I kind of like try to do something to please a bunch of people around me. And you know, the people around me too were kind of making it a big deal about just using jujitsu and kind of emphasizing the fact that it's enough, And I've already like fought in Japan. I fought Kawajiri and Tokoro. And in those fights, I kind of boxed. I used a lot of punching and to get what I needed to get. And not that it's only should be punching or only should be grappling, but it is MMA. And I kind of like veered away from what I believe in my heart. And like, ultimately it's whatever I got to do to win. And I came into that fight with just one tool, and it was just it was a stupid decision. It was like the first time I ever listened to people around me and changed my game plan in my heart. And I paid the price for it. And it just sucks that it have to take like so long to be able to prove myself again.
All right, let us say hello to Kron Gracie. He returns to the octagon this Saturday at UFC 310, taking on Bryce Mitchell on the pay-per-view main card, back after 19 months out of the octagon. Kron, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to be back.
I got to be honest with you, this booking threw me for a loop when it was announced during the UFC 309 broadcast. I did not see this one coming from a mile away, so I'm curious, what was your reaction to finding out you were fighting Bryce Mitchell?
Well, I obviously knew before you knew, but I kind of had plans to come back and fight sooner, but life got in the way. And this fight kind of was a great opportunity for me to get back, So I feel like maybe the UFC gave me a couple of strikers, and then now they're trying to give me a grappler to see what happens.
When you say life got in the way, what do you mean?
I mean life.
Fair enough. Yeah. Last time we saw you was the Charles Jourdain fight, UFC 288, and I know you've talked about it publicly that it wasn't your best night at the office. How do you reflect back on that performance well over a year later?
I feel the same way. I feel like it was a really bad performance. It was kind of I felt a lot of pressure from the jiu-jitsu community and from a lot of people in my family and everybody kind of saying you should just use jiu-jitsu and I don't need to box and I don't need to strike. And it was the first time in my life where I kind of listened to people and I kind of like try to do something to please a bunch of people around me. And, the people around me too were kind of making it a big deal about just using jujitsu and kind of emphasizing the fact that it's enough, And I've already like fought in Japan. I fought Kawajiri and Tokoro. And in those fights, I kind of boxed. I used a lot of punching and to get what I needed to get. And not that it's only should be punching or only should be grappling, but it is MMA. And I kind of like veered away from what I believe in my heart. And like, ultimately it's whatever I got to do to win. And I came into that fight with just one tool, and it was just it was a stupid decision. It was like the first time I ever listened to people around me and changed my game plan in my heart. And I paid the price for it. And it just sucks that it have to take like so long to be able to prove myself again.
Was that sort of easy for you to let go? Because I know you mentioned in that Instagram story, you said you wanted to please the jiu-jitsu community and you followed quote bad advices and you kind of just laid that out. But was that easy to sort of let go? And what has life in the gym been like since the Jourdain fight?
Well, I learned that lesson right away. I learned it as soon as the fight was over. It doesn't take like I've always fought. I've always been my head coach and made my decisions, and everything's gone well, my whole life. Even with jiu-jitsu, I was running my own jiu-jitsu, training. And with MMA, I always had like people around me helping me and supporting me, but I ultimately made my own decisions. And this was kind of like not my decision to make, and I paid the price. And like I said, I would have liked to pay to come back and train and show people some of my skills sooner, but that didn't happen. So now we're here like over a year later. I'm happy to be able to come out and show my skills to the world and see what we can do.
When you say you found out about this fight sooner than we did, when did you find out about it?
A little bit before. I don't know how long I'm allowed to say, but I knew I was training. I was training for Bryce.
What do you think of Bryce as an opponent? Obviously, like you said, he's a grappler, brings a high pace, striking has improved fight after fight, but he is coming off one of the worst knockouts we've ever seen in the UFC when he fought Josh Emmett. What do you think of Bryce as an opponent? What did you think of that knockout? Because that was tough to watch.
Yeah, I mean, this is the fight business. You can be ready to expect anything, you know. So I kind of grew up. I, I grew up with not this as like a spectator. I grew up with it like being a reality, you know, for my dad and for my grandfather and for me and for everyone around me. It was always a reality of fighting. It's never like a joke. Some people think I take it too serious, and you know, like when it comes around media, people are like, "Oh, why are you not happy and joking about this?" Because I know this. I know the severity of the fight game. So it's not a surprise to me that that happens, or and I'm kind of like really aware of that situation. That's why I'm not always like so happy about fighting. But Bryce is a tough opponent. He's a top 15 guy. He's a grappler, so maybe it could be a different fight than the striking guys that I've been fighting. So we'll see how he approaches this fight. We don't know if he's going to run away or if he's going to try to attack me. And I think it's just a good matchup. I think in general, the better the guys get, the better the fight's going to get. And that could be good or bad for me, but I think that's going to create a better fight. Yeah, I mean, not to dog Jourdain or anything, and I had a shitty performance, but like he would just ran away and he was terrified of me. So it's like when someone's not willing to fight as much as I am, it's going to make a difficult fight, no matter what.
Yeah, and with this matchup, usually when you see a couple of high level grapplers getting after it, a lot of times it negates it, and we end up seeing a kickboxing match. Do you feel like you'll see a lot more? We'll see a lot more punching and striking from you on Saturday than obviously the Jourdain fight.
Well, definitely more than the Jourdain fight because I was under strict orders to not throw a punch. So that was a bad idea.
A lot of people have had thoughts about the placement of this fight being on the main card, mainly over the Aljamain Sterling versus Movsar Evloev fight, a fight in the same division as yours. A lot of people feel like there are big title implications in that fight. And I know that seemed a little bit weird to me, but I know Aljo has talked about it. I know others have talked about it as well. I'm curious what your message is to those who have a problem with the card placement of this fight.
I think it's funny because the people have always something to say. And it's interesting that people who would complain about something like that are probably the people who are not even paying for the pay-per-view. They're streaming it for free. You're stealing the pay-per-view. And they're the ones complaining about where the fight is. If anything, it's a free fight for the fans that they get to watch sooner. I don't see why it's such a big deal. Obviously, because I don't really care about that kind of situation. But I think that the placement of the fight is kind of not the most important thing. And, you know, I don't care where I'm at on the card, you know, the sooner the better, really. I get to go on with my life after that. So, obviously the UFC knows what they're doing and they're in the business of making fights and matchmaking. So no one does it better than them. Sure, they didn't do this like on spitefulness. I'm sure that this is a business deal, and it is what it is, you know?
Yeah. I mean, people shouldn't be blaming you or Bryce for this because, like, what are you supposed to say? Nah, I'd rather fight on the Fight Pass prelims. I mean, you just go where you're asked to fight at.
I don't I didn't make this decision. And Bryce is a big name too. I've always had Bryce on my mind because I always thought he was a potential opponent because I knew he had a big name. So I don't see why he wouldn't be on the main card.
So how do you see this all playing out on Saturday? I mean, what the fight's just going to be the fight, and whatever happens, happens. But how do you sort of envision it in your mind right now?
I envision, I always envision training to win. That's my goal. But anything is possible.
Couple of last things. You mentioned your family and you mentioned your dad, and it's been out there that he's had some health issues and suffering from Parkinson's disease. And my colleague actually spoke with him recently, and I wanted to read this quote to you about the fight. And he said, quote, "I'm rooting for him to do a great fight, even though I'm currently not connected to him the way I wanted. The last time we spoke, I felt that he needed space. He needed to be Kron Gracie. He didn't want to be the son of Rickson Gracie anymore. And I accept that as growth in his life, a need to prove himself and be happy on his path. I'm giving him that respect, that space. I continue to root for him, wishing him well. But now as an eyewitness, no longer present, I see that we're aligned, but he's on his path and I'm rooting for his victory." I'm curious your thoughts to that. And do you sort of view things the same way right now?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a lie, but I love my dad, and he's a big foundation of my life and everything that I've become. So, I wish him the best, and I wish him good health, and yeah.
So you don't really take that exact stance, I guess?
No, that's a bit of a lie for me, but it's okay, and it is what it is.
Have you heard from him before this fight at all?
It's been a minute, but I love him. I miss him, and it is what it is.
Fair enough. Kron, I wish you all the best on Saturday. Thank you very much for the time, especially so close to the fight. And all the best to you in that octagon. Long layoff. I know you're excited to get back in there facing a top 15 guy in Bryce Mitchell. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care.